Alright, welcome back to another objectively correct tier list. Again, my opinions are objectively correct. You're free to disagree, but you're wrong. This time around, we are doing tabletop role-playing game tropes. I was actually looking on TierMaker for TTRPG That Guy, where that guy is, there's a bunch of different types of that guy, rules lawyer, people who swap characters, every other session, people who want to argue about something, the people who want to do rule of cool, things like that. I might have to actually go and make that tier list myself, so, oh well. Anyway, our categories are the GOAT for the best tropes, stuff I like seeing at my table, and I don't really, not many downsides to it. Totally Fine is where I don't really have any problems with it. Maybe doesn't really fit with some players, but depends are, of course, everything is going to depend on player, setting, things like that. But these are things where in the past I have seen clear dichotomies between good role players and bad role players when it comes to this thing. Tiresome is things I have just gotten tired of seeing at my table. Things that just come up all the time, or it's not very interesting. Maybe it doesn't leave me a lot of, threads to pull at. Don't make it weird just don't make it weird at the table, man. And get out of my swamp is, if you are doing this, I'm probably not going to invite you back. If it's particularly egregious, I might kick you out mid-session. Yeah. And we're going to start off with Amnesiac. So Amnesiac is one of those things that has a dichotomy. When you have a good role player, they will hand you their character sheet, and it has a full written up backstory, plenty of plot threads to pull at. They just don't know any of it themselves. And that is totally fine. If you want to roll your character as not remembering your backstory, and you're leaving me plenty of opportunities to kind of work things into the story to, temporarily shift the spotlight onto your character, sure, absolutely fine. But when you get that type of player that is just showing up to roll dice, or maybe they don't play a character, it's just them, like that's how they would handle the situation, that's when you end up with an amnesiac who just has no backstory. They just didn't want to put in the work for it. I have amnesia. I don't remember my past. Ooh, okay. Scroll down there for a second. And that is going to be thrown into depends, because it's very clear dichotomy between good role players and bad role players. Animal companion, totally fine. Yeah. If I wouldn't recommend it for a particularly crunchy game where the animal companion has a functional stat block, so to speak, say the Ranger's animal companion in Dungeons and Dragons, I wouldn't recommend that, because you're just gonna be a nerfed character. Sure, if that's fine with you, go for it. And I'd say maybe save that for maybe something like Fate, Savage Worlds, something where the stats don't matter as much. Yeah. Body swapping, that is one I think I would be fine with, but I wouldn't throw that on somebody showing up to roll dice. Somebody who doesn't particularly put too much effort into the role play side of tabletop role playing, not going to put them in a body swap situation. I'm going to reserve that for a player that I know has even if they're not super experienced, maybe they are leaning into the role play side of things. Somebody who's going to emphasize the awkwardness of suddenly being in a new body. Maybe they were playing either just a particularly short person, maybe they're playing hobbit, halfling, gnome, short stack, goblin, whatever. And now they're suddenly in the body of a person who is 6'4", where they're going to mention, oh, I banged my head on the entrance of the tavern or whatever. That's something I would reserve for a player like that. Burned Village Dead Parents is tiresome. So, with very few exceptions, Burned Village Dead Parents is just somebody who doesn't want to write a backstory. There is the rare exception of somebody doing the Conan thing, where it's, oh, I'm looking for the person who killed my parents and burned down my village, and I built like a little bit of lore around it, or wants to work with you to tie that to the big bad guy or whoever the main antagonist of your story is. Maybe they're a secondary antagonist, or maybe they are the main antagonist. But I did most often see this at tables where it's just somebody who didn't want to put in the work, didn't want to write a backstory. Oh, my parents are dead. My village was burned down. I'm now an orphan, lone wanderer. That thing. I do try and get those people to rewrite a backstory, but sometimes it's not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just not as fun for me if you don't give me any threads to pull at. Corruption arc. Corruption arc is going to depend entirely on the player. I will not force this on a character. But if a player comes to me, maybe say they're a new player, and maybe they're just not digging their character, they've put like 4 or 5 sessions on the character, and then they come to me and say, I'm not having fun, I'm not digging it, can I roll a new character? And I'll work with them. I'll just, okay, roll up a new character. I'll try and work a way into the adventuring group or whatever we're doing. And then I will spoil the next session, or at least part of the next session for them, and say, okay, well, when you get to this room, make sure you're the person who grabs a hold of this thing and takes it. And that'll be, the MacGuffin of madness, the chalice of corruption, the emerald of evil. I like alliteration. And crossing the river. So I know it's the metaphorical crossing of the river, going through a trial and then emerging on the other side a different person, but I'm going to make an executive decision, and I'm going to say this is literally crossing the river in a man versus nature sort of way. I do love throwing in the occasional man versus nature scene in one of my adventures. This is not something you can conquer. Not through force. You're not punching your way across a river. You're not doing battle with the river. You're trying to survive against a force that does not care if you live or die. Something along those lines. Driven by revenge, it's very similar to the Burn Village Dead Parents. Oftentimes, I see this on either new players who just don't have either the time or inclination to do a backstory or to come up with a backstory for the character, or the people are just showing up to roll dice. It is another one where it is very rare that I see a character that is driven by revenge and is done well. I think the revenge story makes a better passive viewing experience. So movies, for instance, John Wick, great, reasonably great revenge story. Then you have, say, the Death Wish series, perfectly fine. But when it comes to character backstory, it leaves so few threads for me to pull at to work into the story. The more things you as a player offer your game master as things to pull out from your backstory to work into their narrative or to work into the story that is unfolding, like the collaborative storytelling, I think that's better. Again, unless you get like a bad game master who's just encouraging murder hobo behavior. Somebody who's not bothering to use flowery language to describe scenes. Yeah. Edgelords are get out of my swamp. I don't think I've ever had a player who is playing like edgy McEdgerson character where the entire party wasn't just rolling their eyes. Nobody thinks your character is cool. Nobody is like clapping, and nobody's doing the and then everybody clapped scene for Broody McBruderson sitting in the corner of the tavern, their cloak pulled up, smoking a pipe. They're anybody who talks to them and they just growl at them. That kind of player. Get out. Just don't. Escape from prison. I've done a few prison breaks, not many. It's not something I would throw in like every campaign. Maybe like every few campaigns I'd do it. One prison break that I had my players run, it's just they were falsely accused of a crime. And the other one was the you wake up in a prison start. It's totally fine if you want to do a you wake up in the prison. And they had to escape while this fortress was under siege. This is kind of one of those don't take your time, don't deviate from the plan, just beat feet and get going. Because this fortress is surrounded, or mostly surrounded, and and you got to get out. But still, totally fine. Fate or Destiny is not I don't think I would ever do a chosen one character. Maybe a shared fate. The party is the party of destiny. Because I wouldn't want to have the other players feel like they are playing second fiddle to this one character. And I think it's harder to shine the spotlight on all the other players if you have one central person who is by their nature more important than the others. If you had a particularly skilled and experienced role player who is attentive to the table, so as a game master, being attentive to the table means you're looking at what all the players are doing. If somebody's busting out their phone and doom scrolling, or if people are just talking to themselves about something that happened, it means you're not fully engaging all the players. And sure, especially if it gets down into, say, combat, where you're playing a really gritty system, where somebody might spend, a minute to a minute and a half trying to decide on what to do in combat. That's okay, fine, but if you're at the table and you're interacting with your players as a group, and people are busting out their phone, you did something wrong. So yeah, but as like a fated one, the Destiny character, the Frodo, the Harry Potter, the Neo, the Luke Skywalker, all those, I would only throw that at like a really experienced and attentive player, somebody that I had previously seen, try and re-engage other players at the table. Um, Found family. So that's totally fine. If you want to have your party of disparate weirdos, if they want to come together to be like a family, that's fine. It's perfectly adequate. Grumpy Sunshine, that's another one totally fine. If you have two characters, one of them is Grumbles McGrumperson and the other one is Bubbles McRainbow, and in the session, they kind of like play off of each other and something where they're kind of bouncing off, Bubbles McRainbow is trying to uplift Grumbles McGrumperson or whatever. That's fine. Guild halls, they are so cliche and tropey for a way to fill out a world in a method that is smooth brain, no thoughts, head empty. Just make some guild halls in your fantasy, not Europe setting. It's fine. It's fine if you just want to throw in some whatever. Hidden backstory. So that's another one that's going to be kind of like Amnesiac, and that it's going to depend on the type of player, because you can have a player who says, oh, here is my real backstory, but I am either A, not telling the other players my backstory, or B, I am lying to the other players about my backstory. That can work out pretty well, because you can drop in their real name or drop in kind of like clues a little bit along the way. Maybe an NPC recognizes them. Maybe they pass by a wanted poster and there's a hastily scrawled picture that almost sort of maybe kind of looks like them. You can drop in stuff like that. But if you have one of those players, again, who's using this as an excuse to just not do a backstory, where it's, oh, I have a secret I have a secret past, I'm not going to tell anybody, even the GM. Now you're not just giving me not many threads, you're giving me no threads, and so it becomes hard for me to shift that spotlight onto you in the storytelling sense. Horny Bard, get out of my swamp. It's one thing if, say, you do a one-off flirty comment, or maybe you heard, I don't know, a ridiculous pickup line like, hey girl, are you a cigarette? Because I want to get you lit and put your butt in my mouth. Something like that. I love that one. Those are fine, but if you are just doing it constantly, no, just get out. Just a weird little guy. I love just a weird little guy characters because, of course, it's statistics. Most people are going to have seen the same mass media. A lot of people are going to have seen Game of Thrones. A lot of them are going to have seen, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Star Trek, all the big franchises. And so you're going to run into a lot of characters if you GM for a bunch of different tables, or if you just do it for a long enough period of time and you have, occasionally somebody new comes in and maybe somebody goes out, you're going to see a lot of the same types of character archetype. So I love the just a weird little guy. Give me a 3-foot tall goblin that talks like groundskeeper Willie, and starts every battle with "Grease me up, woman," strips off his shirt and gets the butter. Just I love weird characters. Kidnap family, it's going to depend on time frame, because that is a ticking clock if it's something that just happened. Say like, oh, I'm out adventuring for my little sister who went missing 3 days ago. You've thrown a ticking clock on my lap. But if we're saying, oh, I'm looking for my older brother who was kidnapped when I was 5, and you work out some lore, things that you know about the kidnappers, they they wore a particular medallion or they were dressed in a very specific type of way. That can give me a couple of threads to pull on, and it's not an immediate problem that's going to, say, take precedent over other things. Knight in Sour Armor, totally fine. Absolutely, totally fine. The Knight in the Sour Armor trope is, it's not specifically a knight, but it's a character who starts their profession. It could be a knight, could be some various type of adventurer. If you're playing like urban fantasy, could be a cop or a detective, something like that, where they started off doing it for noble reasons, but the reality of the real world or the profession in which they have chosen turns them eventually into a more jaded and cynical person. That's the Knight in Sour Armor, so that's totally fine. Mommy or daddy issues, just don't make it weird. I am not your therapist. The table is not your therapy session. As long as you're doing it as this is your character and it's not you, that's fine. But if you come to the table and you're putting your own real world mommy or daddy issues onto your character because you want to talk about it with somebody, please don't. I'm not your therapist. I don't make that kind of money. No. Murder Hobo. Murder Hobo is get out of my swamp. It's one of those things that a Murder Hobo is zero fun for me as a game master. The person who's just, I've got no family, I go around, and all I want to do is fight with everything. I settle no roots. I have no backstory. Just shit like that. Get out. Don't come back. It's especially worse when you end up with one of those guys at your table who then tries to coerce other players into behaving like a murder hobo. They're like, come on, guys, let's get them. Let's get out your swords. Like, we got to turn this into a fight. You're like, we got to fight, and it's like, what, dude? We're just looking for information. The guy who, while you're interrogating somebody, just like runs in and like cleaves off their head. That guy. Get out of my swamp. NPC betrayal is not something I would do often. So I'm not. Okay, caveat. Big caveat there. I'm not going to do it. I'm definitely not going to do it every session. I'm not going to probably even do it every campaign. Unless, caveat is, we're playing cyberpunk. If we're playing in the cyberpunk genre or another genre in which that is appropriate, you should be expecting your fixer, the people who hire you, the homeless guy on the street corner, the guy that you're buying weapons from. You should expect everyone to be stabbing you in the back. You should never trust anybody in the cyberpunk genre. It's like a core defining trope of the genre itself. The idea of the backstab. That goes all the way back to like the original writing by William Gibson. Yeah, yeah. You should expect a knife in the back at any second in the cyberpunk genre. But if you're doing it constantly in other genres, it carries no weight. Players will start to expect it. They will start to plan for it. Nah, just don't. NPC romance. Just don't make it weird. I am not going to ERP with you. I'm I'm not going to flirt with you. I know, I got a seductive voice. I know the ladies love it, and I am not. I don't care if you're a pretty girl. I'm not going to ERP with you at the table. Party betrayal. Party betrayal is like corruption arc in that I wouldn't want to see it anywhere near regularly in my party. But again, if I have a new player and they have put in the time and they're not just switching characters trying to switch characters every few sessions or whatever, and they're just not having a lot of fun with it. Okay, I'll do it similar to the corruption arc. I'll tell them, oh, okay, in the next session we're going to this place. That's like where we left off last session. Just when we get into this room, don't be standing here. And so maybe it's like pitfall trap where the party falls in, except for the person betraying them. And he gets to stand on the edge of the pitfall and gloat while he pulls the lever that seals him up and, separates him from the party. Uh, but it's not, if it's somebody doing that, like in the edgelord way, that's going straight into get out of my swamp. Player romance. Again, just don't make it weird. Nobody wants to be sitting at the table covering up a boner. Like don't be if you want to do that, go play Fatal. Go roll for anal circumference. it, yeah. PvP is going to depend. Again, if it's that party betrayal edgelord thing, nah, nope, get it out. But if it's the right setting, it could be perfectly appropriate. Take L5R, Legend of the Five Rings. It would be perfectly within reason in the setting for something like a disagreement or a perceived slight against a person's honor to end with a duel to first blood. That would be perfectly within reason for that setting. Absolutely. But if it's just edgy McEdgerson, oh, I'm going to steal from the party, and if you don't like it, we're going to fight about it. That kind of player, nah, out. Get out. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. Redemption arcs, those are fine. If you want to play a character, maybe a former soldier in the big bad's army, and you want to go on a redemption arc of redeeming yourself, and that's why you're an adventurer now, go for it. Reluctant hero, it's fine as long as you're not a feet dragger. So if you're the type of player who is, I want to stay at the tavern, or you're coming back from the adventure and you're supposed to go meet with the guildmaster or the mayor or whoever it was that gave you the adventure, and you're supposed to come back and like meet them right away, but oh no, I want to go to the blacksmith and I want to sell off all this treasure first. Man, just don't. Romancing the big bad evil guy again. No, just don't make it. I'm not gonna flirt with you. I'm not gonna stroke your ego. I'm not gonna tell you how handsome you are, or how pretty you are. I'm not gonna get into any details. I'm not telling you what I want to suck or lick or whatever. Oh God. Um, Seeing each other's memories. That one is gonna depend. So that's another one, kind of like the fate or destiny, where if you're going to be doing anything at the table where it's just you and one other player kind of bouncing back and forth and playing off one another and talking to each other, keep an eye on the table, man. look around, see if people are busting out their phones, if somebody's like getting up and going upstairs or going into the other room to talk on their phone, or if they're going to the kitchen to heat up food or something like that. TikTok, man, wrap it up. Uh, Surprisingly normal backstory, just like the weird little guy. It's great to deviate from the typical archetypes that you see players roll for their character. There's so many where it's like, oh, that I've seen somebody roll this exact character before, but if you're just gonna play, a man about town or some kind of townie, and you're gonna do a spot of adventuring for maybe a couple of weeks or months to get some money together because last week a group of adventurers rolled through town and they were holding a whole bunch of bags of money. And so, you want to do a couple of adventures so you can set aside some savings for a wedding and a family. That's perfectly fine. And that's a great deviation from the archetypes of character that you can see that get pretty repetitive. Um, Tavern explodes. So, I mean, there is the idea of at the start of the game, the tavern explodes. I've never done that. I have done one tavern fire, but it wasn't the start of the game. It was probably like maybe around session 3 or 4, where the players were being set up. It was actually a part of the prison escape. That's why they got thrown in prison that first time. They were framed for burning down the tavern because they were the last ones seen leaving. But I have done one building explosion. That one, oh god, I had a player. He's normally a really good role player, but for some reason he just rolled that klepto, thiefy rogue type thing. I think we were playing either D&D or Pathfinder. And so he goes into the alchemist shop. He goes to do sleight of hand to grab a vial of alchemist's fire, and he rolls a 1. And I'm like, okay, no way you're getting out of this. Shopkeeper looks you dead in the eyes. He goes, hey, you put that back right now. And the player, he says, oh, I'm going to take the vial of alchemist fire and I'm going to throw it right into the rack in front of me. And I am not the type of game master to say, are you sure? I know that's a long running trope of GMs trying to stop their players from doing something stupid, hurting the cats type thing. I don't do that unless I feel it is my fault. Maybe I didn't adequately white space the scene. White spacing is describing the scene. It's from writing novels. That's where the term comes from. And so if it's something like that where, oh, maybe I describe it as a cavern or a canyon that they come to and somebody says, I want to try jumping across it. I'm like, it's like 40 feet across. You're not going to make it. I'll do something like that because I didn't adequately describe it. But if I have adequately described, and I did adequately describe, this is a shelf with like 60 alchemists fire on it. Okay. You go up like a nuke. And yeah, I will finish that story when we get to TPK. But I guess it's fine, yeah. Time travel, that's not something I usually throw into any of my games. It's one of those things like resurrection. If resurrection is trivial, death means nothing. If time travel is trivial, mistakes mean nothing. If you can just go back and fix your problems, nothing has any stake. So that's something I'm not really going to do. I've only done it once, but it was a trap where they were going to this jungle temple, like deep in the jungle, and they were supposed to go and grab something from out of there, but they ended up triggering this trap, and it basically sent them back in time, right outside of the temple. And Yeah, it's just sort of a defense mechanism on the temple to keep people from stealing stuff. Now, I think that's probably the only way I would do that. Is something kind of pointless and short term, not something like, oh, you go back 20 years in the past or something. Opens up too many plot holes. TPK or total party kill? I will TPK in one instance, caveat. So I will TPK if the players collectively agree to do something really, really stupid. Like if they all decide to jump into the bottomless pit, it's okay, and they were never heard from again. Roll up new characters. The caveat to that is if I am playing a setting in which it makes sense. Take Paranoia. In Paranoia, your default role is a troubleshooter, where you go out, you find trouble, and you shoot it. Paranoia, you don't die nobly. You don't go out a hero. You don't hold the gate against the enemies of Alpha Complex to save the rest of the party. No, everybody in Paranoia dies by misadventure. And so it is perfectly within reason for one of the players to do something kind of dumb and get the entire party killed. Perfectly within reason in Paranoia. But circling back to the alchemist shop scene, I didn't TPK because despite the fact that basically everybody in that building took like 60 plus damage. Actually, no, it would have been. Yeah, it was probably closer to around 180. Something like I think that's like the statistical average for that many alchemists fire. And it should have killed everybody. I only had the person who threw it roll up a new character. I'm like, yeah, you are no longer. It's like you are a level 3 rogue. You're no longer just dead. You are ash. Your memory has been erased from the fabric of the universe. You were at like negative 160 hit points. But basically everybody else, I just had them barely scrape it out. Most of the people left with 1 to 5 health, clothing set on fire, scrambling out, crawling out on hand and knee. So that's really going to depend on scenario and player action. Yeah. Veteran adventurer is not something I'm going to do in a mechanical sense, so I'm not going to have a player go into say D&D, Pathfinder, something like that, where they're like a level 7 adventurer and everyone else is level 1 or 2. Nah, I'm not doing that. But if they just want it as their backstory, that's fine. Yeah, that's totally fine. You meet in a tavern. So you meet in a tavern might be the most overused cliche start to any role-playing game ever. I imagine everybody out there who has ever been in a role-playing game, ever played tabletop for more than a single campaign or under more than one game master, has had a you meet in a tavern start. That said, it's fine. If you are a GM and you're worried about doing the you meet in a tavern, don't worry about it. Just do it. No, who cares? It's gonna be the first maybe 20 to 30 minutes of your session for something like who knows how many sessions you can claw together. Getting everybody herded together to show up for sessions. But yeah, okay, so again, this has been my objectively correct opinions. Again, you are free to disagree, but you are wrong. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.